Let me tell you about the time a woman in designer heels tried to steal my entire family's legacy and almost burned herself to the ground in the process. You ever pull up to your old home after a few years away expecting nostalgia and instead get threatened with fake government authority on your own front porch? That was me. Jake Thornfield, Staff Sergeant, Army vet, Colorado native, standing there with my jaw on the floor as Brenda Weatherby, Queen of HOA nonsense, started waving forged documents in my face like she was the damn sheriff of Pine Ridge Mountain Estates. Her first words, "You don't understand. I am the government here. This is my valley and you need to get out." Honest to God, I thought it was a prank. Turns out Brenda doesn't joke. Ever. So there she was, perfume strong enough to stun a bear, clutching a thick folder of violations, claiming I owed $15,000 in back fees for my grandfather's 1934 cabin. She stood right on my porch, click-clack heels digging into old cedar, acting like she owned the place. And all I could taste was anticipation, metallic electric, the feeling you get when something big's about to go down. Now Brenda thought she had me pegged. Some absent cabin owner easy to intimidate. But she hadn't done her homework. She had no clue who she was dealing with or what kind of hell she was about to unleash on herself. So I just smiled. "Ma'am, you might want to sit down for this." Her face lost all color, but that's getting ahead of things. Let's rewind, because to really appreciate the fireworks, you got to know how this war started. See, that cabin wasn't a vacation rental. My grandfather Ezra was a Depression-era stubborn cuss who trusted nobody but his own hands and a labyrinth of paperwork. The man built every wall himself, cut every log, and kept meticulous records in steel cabinets that rattled whenever you walked by. Title deeds, mineral claims, survey maps, he documented everything. He didn't just homestead that land, he practically tattooed it with his legacy. When I shipped out for my last deployment, I asked my neighbor, old Hank Morrison, to keep an eye on the place. Hank's a Vietnam vet, pipe tobacco always on his jacket, and probably the only person alive more suspicious of authority than my granddad. I figured with Hank around, the most I'd have to worry about was a wandering bear. I never expected a suburban Karen in stilettos and her army of fake paperwork. Brenda Weatherby, 52. No kids moved from Denver with her poor husband Lloyd, who always looked like he'd just seen a ghost and might never recover. She had a lot of time on her hands, an endless need to control, and apparently zero concept of property law. Somehow Brenda convinced a few newbies in the area there was a real HOA, and this is the genius part, just started acting like she ran the whole valley. Only Pine Ridge Mountain Estates didn't have a legal HOA. Never did. She made up letterhead fake petitions, forged county documents, you name it. 6 months into my deployment, she showed up with a tape measure and a posse of confused neighbors. Hank said she took photos of my cabin, mumbled about community safety, and then started slapping violation notices on my door like she was deputizing the squirrels. Next thing I know, I'm getting letters overseas. Structural deficiencies, fire hazards, unauthorized modifications with monthly fines that stacked up faster than I could count. 12 grand just for being gone. And it wasn't just me. Turns out Brenda had made a sport of targeting military families who couldn't fight back. 2 other households, good people, lost their places after relentless threats and intimidation. That's when my blood boiled. Nothing in the world makes me see red faster than someone preying on folks serving their country, counting on us being too far away to defend ourselves. But Brenda missed one thing. Ezra's paperwork obsession wasn't paranoia. It was a damn shield. Every time she tried to claim jurisdiction, every bogus fine, every official letter, she was trespassing, not just on my land, but on decades of bulletproof documentation. 2 weeks after I returned, Brenda made her move. Picture this. I'm on my porch, morning coffee in hand, sun barely cresting over the pine trees. I hear engines, a little convoy coming up the gravel. 3 vehicles, one with a magnetic county logo obviously slapped on for show. Out steps Brenda, high heels and all, followed by a sweaty guy clutching a clipboard, Gary Hoffman, county building inspector. She strutted up like she was leading a parade, the smell of cheap perfume and diesel clashing with the clean mountain air. "Mr. Thornfield, this is Gary from County Building Inspection. We're here for your overdue structural assessment." Brenda was pointing at logs, wires, foundation stones, listing violations with the dramatic flair of a TV prosecutor. Gary, for his part, kept muttering, "Well, for a 1934 cabin," until Brenda shut him up every time. Then I saw it, Gary's citation form already filled out before he'd looked at a single nail. As he bent to examine the foundation, a receipt tumbled out of his pocket. I scooped it up, $500 paid by B. Weatherby for structural consultation. She'd literally bought herself a condemnation order. Gary wasn't an inspector, he was a pawn, a paid actor in Brenda's little bureaucracy theater. He handed me a condemnation notice. Brenda's eyes lit up already, talking about emergency demolition protocols. I pocketed that receipt and stayed silent. 3 years of military intelligence had taught me one thing: don't tip your hand too early. That night I dug into Gary Hoffman's credentials. Turns out he wasn't licensed for structural assessments, just basic inspections. His condemnation order was about as official as a monopoly deed. The next morning I filed complaints with every authority I could think of: state, licensing, district attorney, inspector general. Within 48 hours the county threw out the condemnation. Gary was suspended, and the dangerous cabin passed every real inspection with flying colors. Here's where Brenda's story should have ended, but she doubled down. Filed police reports claiming I'd threatened her. Drove by my cabin every day, snapping photos, plotting her next move. What she didn't know was that I was cataloging every one of her crimes: fake documents, bribery, trespassing, building a case file that would make Ezra proud. Then came the next surprise. Brenda shows up this time with 3 elderly neighbors and a lawyer who looked like he'd been sleeping in his car. She gave a whole speech about community values and safety waiving petitions and legal notices. Sweet Mrs. Henderson, 78, and wouldn't hurt a fly, asked, "Didn't the county say Jake's cabin was fine?" Brenda snapped Mrs. Henderson, "The county's been compromised by military influence. We need to take matters into our own hands." The lawyer, Ricky Dalton, started reading citations wrong, property descriptions, wrong section numbers, even the wrong county listed. I checked his bar number on my phone. It was for a disbarred attorney in California. I called him out right there. His face turned white. He stammered and beat a retreat to his junker Honda. As for the neighbors, they had no idea they'd signed HOA documents. Brenda had handed them what she claimed was a neighborhood safety petition. She was using their signatures as proof of authority she didn't have. Once I explained, Mrs. Henderson cried not from guilt, but from realizing she'd been used as a pawn. Brenda still wouldn't quit. She started calling my chain of command, claiming I was an unstable, dangerous veteran, tried to get me in trouble with the Army, the VA, you name it. When that didn't work, she went nuclear one afternoon. I found my gate wide open, tire tracks through the mud and power tools buzzing behind my workshop. Brenda, in designer boots, was directing a contractor to tear down my fence and restore public access to county land. She'd even put her own padlock on my gate, locked me out of my own home. This was no longer annoying, it was criminal. So I set up trail cameras all around the property. Sure enough, within 2 days, I had crystal clear footage of Brenda and Lloyd sneaking in at night, moving markers, cutting fences, trying to establish adverse possession, the legal equivalent of squatting, and hoping no one notices. But here's what she never expected. While she played games with fake surveys, I spent a weekend knee-deep in Ezra's steel cabinets, sifting through dusty envelopes and oilcloth-wrapped deeds. That's when I found it, the original 1934 homestead deed. Not just for the cabin or a few acres, but for the entire valley. 2,400 acres, including mineral rights. Turns out, while developers in the 70s sold surface lots to unsuspecting buyers, Ezra had kept the mineral rights for every inch. Brenda's neighborhood was sitting on top of a fortune in natural gas she couldn't touch without my signature. So I called in Sarah Palmer, a real estate attorney with a reputation for burying fraudsters. We built a 3-pronged attack file, a quiet title suit to cement my mineral rights, launch a federal criminal complaint for targeting military families, and sue Brenda and her corporate backers. Yep, Mountain Vista Energy was in on it for damages and fraud. Sarah's eyes sparkled. "This is legal dynamite, Jake. You're about to blow their whole operation sky high." Then we coordinated with Sheriff Tom, who was itching for the chance to arrest Brenda. Set the trap for the monthly town hall meeting, press invited, community-packed evidence ready. The night before, Brenda made one last desperate move. My tires were slashed, my water line was poisoned with chemicals, and my cabin nearly torched by gasoline at 3 a.m. Every move was caught on camera. Her Lloyd, even Mountain Vista's land acquisition specialist, Buck Morrison, who tried to bribe and threaten me, not knowing I was recording every word. The town hall exploded. Brenda stormed in, demanded the podium, railed about my terrorist threats. I stood up, laid out Ezra's deed, played audio of Buck threatening accidents for stubborn landowners, showed video of Lloyd trespassing and Brenda giving orders. Sheriff Tom cuffed Brenda on the spot for fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. The whole room watched her fantasy world collapse in real time. The old neighbors cheered. The press snapped photos. Lloyd apologized and vanished to Florida. 6 months later, Brenda was in federal prison. Mountain Vista filed bankruptcy. The FBI unraveled a dozen similar scams in other states. And me, I took the settlement money, set up a conservation fund in Ezra's name to protect the valley forever. The natural gas stayed in the ground. We built a community center for military kids and veterans. Sarah Palmer, my lawyer, became my wife, and Hank got a full-time job as caretaker. Every year, Pine Ridge hosts a festival celebrating veterans and environmental protection. Justice wasn't just served, it was served flaming hot with a side of karma. And here's the thing, Brenda didn't lose because I was the toughest or the loudest or had the biggest stick. She lost because she didn't know how to read a deed, and I did. She bet everything on fake authority, thinking nobody would look past her paperwork. But authority isn't a fancy letterhead, it's the truth in black and white kept safe in a filing cabinet while everyone else is bluffing. So let me ask you, when's the last time you actually read the documents for your home, your land, your HOA? Are you sure your authority figures are real, or are you just trusting the loudest voice in the room? Because Brenda wasn't unique. For every Brenda out there, there's 1,000 homeowners too scared or too busy to check the facts. Here's my challenge. Spend an hour this week looking up your property records. You might be surprised by what you find. What's the most ridiculous HOA rule you've ever run into? Tell me your story in the comments. Hell, maybe someone else needs to hear it. If you believe knowledge is power, hit subscribe. Remember, real authority doesn't have to shout, it just quietly wins one page of proof at a time.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video của mình.